When I came to Port of Choix, we got our mail in summer by the mail boats. Probably would be once every 2-3 weeks. And if anything happened, would be longer than that. And when ice conditions was on, well, we just had to put up a rock claim as to the mail conditions. There was nothing to bring the mail. And in winter time, the mail was carried by dog teams. And I saw it here in Port of Choix when the mail was carried by an ox team. Now, you know how swift that was. From Belburns to Port of Choix by an ox. And the man who carried the mail, Mr. Elijah Stiles, he wore a parka to his ankles to keep himself from freezing. He had to.
Did you do the mail as well as the telegraph?
Yes, I assorted the mail from here to Flowers Cove. I assorted the mail. Used to open the bags and assort it out and put it in different bags and then assort it for each office. And I do the same going back. The mail would all come in a Port of Choix bag and I'd assort it out for different places. One for Deer Lake, one for Bombay, and one for each little outport.
When did you discontinue, or when did you retire from the mail service and the telegraph service?
Well, that's about 25 years ago. The wages, now at that time I was getting $41.50 a month when I came here. Now I was to pay my board out of that. Fine light, fine oil for the little lamp was in the office. And I used to send $20 a month home to my mother because we had a large family. And Papa was sick with a TB leg, and there was only 3 girls to keep the family. There was no dole at that time, and no help from the welfare. So then, I'd have $5 a month to live on. Well, now then, the time of depression, they cut us down. I went down as low to $10 a month, and I had to quit.
That was your wages?
That was my wages. I was married then. $10 a month, so I quit. I had to.
Well, you still managed to raise a big family. How many children do you have?
I have 11 children. I have 9 living and 2 dead. As you know, I told you about losing my son. He'll be dead 3 years ago, the 22nd of September coming. And I was a widow at that time, getting $55 a month as a widow. And I had 2 children. This little boy that was killed, he was a boy at that time, Bobby, and Norma. And anyhow, I was getting $55 a month. So when he was killed, they took away my widow's money, and they put me off on compensation. And they gave me $75 a month, they told me. That would be what he would be paying me if he was in board, if he was living. So then they took away the bit of widow's money I was getting. They gave me $75 a month, and the welfare rose the widow's money at that time to $85 a month, and the welfare gave me $10. And in winter, it cost me $50 a month for oil, $25 for my kitchen stove, $25 for my furnace. I got $25 a month to live on. And I've contacted our members about it. Well, I'm going to do something for you. Oh, yes, it's going to be done if I'm elected. If I'm elected. Well, now then, anyhow, now don't call me Mr. Call me Jerry, or call me Tom, whatever his name may be. Well, now, when he's elected and gets a wig collar on, you've seen your last of your Jerry or your Tommy. You won't see them no more. And they don't do anything about it. Well, we just got to suffer on. Then when election comes around again, oh, you must vote. I wouldn't vote. There's only one crowd gets anything out of the government as to living, and I won't say who they are. You can guess. But if you can get a child, if I was younger and could get a child each year, they'd give me a bounty for that child, and they'd feed that child, but they wouldn't ask who owned the child. That's not in it. As long as I can get them, that's good enough. He was my wage earner, the only boy I had home. He was 20 years old in August. He was killed in September. He was the only one I had home.
He was killed on the job?
He was killed carelessly out on the fish plant. He was, the floor had an angle of 45 like that. Now, the ice maker was up here. He was down in just a hole with only standing room. He didn't have an inch to save himself, not an inch. And the ice was coming down. He shoveled it with a shovel below in a chute to the crowd below. So while he was shoveling this to a crowd below, everything went fine. There was no worry. There was no danger. But 4 days the plant didn't work. And the ice maker was going, and the ice was coming down, down. And by it accumulated up like that, right tight to the roof in this hole. And he went down to chip the ice. There wasn't even power on, because I asked one of the engineers, and I said, was there any power on? He said, absolutely none, Mrs. Spence. So anyhow, now he chipped this out this way. See, more underneath than he did on top. And when he chipped it out with no power, on a sunshiny day, it was thawing out underneath. You see, there was nothing to hold it. And when he got it chipped like this, the whole thing tumbled. Killed him instantly. And there was a bolt sticking out about that length, they told me. And that's what took his head. He had a lacerated brain. And the next day, they sawed off that bolt. When my son went back, one of the boys went back, that bolt was sawed off.
This is a small plant, not the new one.
No, the Zim Downey.
The floating plant.
The floating plant, the Zim Downey. That's the plant.
Has there been investigations, and have you visited St. John's or talked with the officials on this?
Yes, I visited St. John's. But just all they'll tell you can't take compensation to court. I was talking to Mr. Etchegary. I was talking to the welfare department. I was talking to them in the compensation board. And all they'll tell you can't take the compensation to court. That's all you'll get. It's $75 a month. But they'll take away your widow money.
How long will you receive this money? Did they tell you?
They told me that I'd get this money for 5 years, and then their obligation to me was over. But I went to St. John's on that very thing, and I went out to Confederation Building. I spent 3 days out there going back and forth before I could get in to see the compensation. They tell me, oh, there's an important meeting on. Well, you won't see them today. Well, go back and come back tomorrow. And when I went out, he told me that for 5 years I would get this $75 a month. And I told him, but when I went in, he started to ask me, I started to talk about, why I was here and all this. He started to write on paper, when did he was killed, and when this happened, and when that happened. I said, now look, you don't want me to go over this story again because you already know all about it. I got 2 checks in my handbag, which I refused to sign, and you know all about it. Well, then he started on to talk. But they seemed just to try to get clear of it if they could, the whole thing. Get clear of it if they can. I wouldn't sign no paper. I haven't signed not any paper on it, not one. And I wouldn't today. But I told them the 5 years, I certainly wouldn't accept that. But if I only live 1 year, I want that money. And if I live 2 years, I want it. And if I live 20 years, I still want it. But I think their aim is, in the 5 years, I'll be lawful. I mean, well, I'll come under the rule of getting my old age pension, and that will take off I fill a paper every 6 months that I'm still depending on him for support. Well, but as to signing the agreement, I wouldn't sign anything. And then I've got to take that to a justice of peace, mind you, to get that. That's how nice they are. I told him I would go to, I'd go to the House of Assembly in St. John's, and approach Mr. Smallwood. And he told me Mr. Smallwood was a very saucy man. And I told him I was a very saucy woman, and if I had to take him by the shirt collar, I'd do it. And I would, too. And I said, I can handle him because I've seen him. He's not very big. Not as big as I am in size.
Mrs. Trent, could you tell me what services you have here in the St. Barb district related to the medical and your nursing service and nursing stations?
Well, sir, from Bombay to St. Anthony, it's a distance of 250 miles. We have no doctor. We have no ambulance even, and we haven't even got a stretcher unless you make one out of a gill net with 2 sticks. And for our nursing station, we can't expect a nurse to look at you and tell you what's wrong with you. Can we? Well, it's the only thing they say, you got to go to St. Anthony. Now, St. Anthony from Port au Choix only has a dirt road. In fact, from Bombay, it's only a dirt road, and a very rough one. And there have been times that they've gone to St. Anthony and have to be towed over the washouts in the road, but by trucks. Now, you take a sick person and take them, or even an accident, I will put, from here to St. Anthony. If they're very bad, they're dead when they get there, because they'll die from the bumps. They're jumping around in a car, or whatever they may have. But if an accident happens, first thing, where are we going to go to get a car? Whose car are we going to get? Now, it's a bad road to put a car that a man paid probably $3,000 over a dirt road, like St. Anthony. So we have no doctor, which we should have a hospital somewhere between Bombay and St. Anthony. But there's no doubt, if you live to get to St. Anthony, you get the best of treatment when you get there. You don't get a black look from nobody. I was there myself. You get the best of treatment, and you get the best of food. And for the nurses and the aides, they're beautiful as to the way you're treated. Couldn't be treated better, not in this world. But it's a journey that you got to take. You can't get to St. Anthony less than 5 hours.
A few years ago, there was a doctor here. What happened?
Well, sir, I got to speak from my own experience. I was in that hospital at Port Saunders. The old hospital was there. And I had double pneumonia. He was a good doctor. Kind, gentle, and a gentleman in every respect. He treated me like a father. And I think that he was, and I know, a good doctor. And they got up a petition, and they put him out. Well, Dr. Addy went away, and he told me the day he was leaving, he said, the only thing I hope, he said, that God will send a doctor to take my place for the people of Port au Choix and Port Saunders. Although he said they drove me out. But he said, I can't say anything more. I wish God will send somebody to do what a doctor will do. And 2 years later, he came back to pay all the people a visit. So he didn't have a bad heart, did he? And as far as I can understand, it all started over an X-ray picture. And they said it was castor. And being a Cuban, they wanted to get him out. But he was a worker. He was going to start a farm in Port Saunders and put people to work. But he didn't feel like giving a man a dole order if he didn't need it, if he wasn't sick. And many went to him and tried to form an excuse, a bad back or something was wrong, and he said, no, go to work. And that came out in the papers from St. John's that they were going to give the people of St. Barb's a good cooling off before they sent a doctor. And believe you me, we did get the cooling off. Now, it's St. Anthony or Bombay, and you got a very rough road to face. Now, that's another thing. At a distance of 250 miles, we got, on the coast, about 20 beer taverns, but we got no doctor. Now, the beer taverns, you know, as far as I can understand, has got something to do with the government, too. The government got something to do with that. Well, if they could put 20 beer taverns, surely they can give us one doctor and one hospital. No, the district of St. Barb's is forgotten, and the people are laying low and sinking small. They're depending on somebody else to come and intercede for them. The only man that ever I knew that I could get in contact was Mr. Chalker, and we have a little row, but then he tried to do what he could if it's something I wanted done for me, and many more. But our other members, I wouldn't vote on polling day. I would not put a wig collar on a man to walk around and laugh at me. You're known as Mrs. Spence and Mrs. Plowman and Mrs. Gould before elections. He knows everybody. But after elections, he'd meet you. He don't know you. Don't know you then at all. He was coming, I remember, was going to make monthly visits to our communities. But we haven't seen him since. Now we got another Mr. Marshall. I suppose we'll never see him no more.
What do you think the future holds for Port au Choix, Miss Spence? You watched it grow, and now you're seeing it expanding every month.
I've watched Port of Swa grow from a tiny motorboat to the outboard motor, from the trawl to the gillnet, to the longliners. And I have to say that the people of Port of Swa needs to be congratulated on what they've done. They're good workers, and they've worked hard. Now then, I'll ask you and I'll tell you something else. The fishermen of Port of Swa asked me sometime to write a letter regarding a breakwater for their boats. We've experienced a lot of boats taking a lot of beating here in Port of Swa when the storm comes on. And men will stay up all night long to watch their boats just swinging on this piece of rope. Now, just trusting to the luck. And then sometimes get in a boat and go out and put another anchor to the boat to make it secure. And probably that rope will snap and the shore still come in the beach. They got no help, they're helpless. But if they had a breakwater, they could put all their boats inside of this breakwater and they could go to bed. You know, that's their hard work, those boats. All their life savings. The government didn't give them that. And the government won't give them anything if they lose her. They'll give them so much, probably 60% of the boat, the insurance. But how much of that man got aboard of that boat, which belongs to himself? Not the insurance on the boat at all. I know a man this year lost his boat. He lost more of his own personal things aboard that boat than his insurance come to. And yet, that's all can be done. For us, for the piece of rope. Now then, they sent down a man from St. John's to investigate this and to take a survey of where the breakwater would be put. Well, I think it was on over there somewhere from Mr. Darby's across to Farwell's. Why did this man choose this place for the breakwater? Why didn't some of the fishermen have the privilege to come up and say, this is where we want our breakwater? They're the men that got to use it. Probably that man from St. John's never saw a fish and probably was never aboard of a boat.
We met with your community council the other night, and they talked to us about some of the work they're trying to do and some of their problems.
Well, the community council here in Port of Swa is of a small scale, that you know. But they're doing a wonderful job. You can put your garbage out by the door on Saturdays. You know what days they're coming. Everything is cleaned up nicely. There's no dirt around your door. You can put anything out, whatever it is. There's nothing too big or too small. They take all the garbage. They clean up everything. And if you were to go down and visit the pit where the garbage is dumped, you so much taken out of Port of Swa. The home's got to be clean around the outside. The ground's got to be clean because they pick up everything. And the people are interested in their homes. I don't believe that there's another small community on the coast better kept up than Port of Swa. They paint their homes. They do it up inside. They clean the grounds. They're doing everything to make Port of Swa the nice little place you want it to be. I think Port of Swa is a lovely little place. Beautiful. And there's nice people here. I like them, I got to admit. And I found good friends among the people of Port of Swa. But some people, you know, they say, oh, well, this one is not nice and that one's not nice. But nobody in this world is without a fault. And Port of Swa got faults, but she got a lot to cover up for her faults. And people work hard. And when I came here first, do you know what our pastime was? Go up to Mr. Farwell's after office hours for a game of flinch. We'd have our little game of flinch all around the table. You know, you wouldn't know if some big ball was on. We used to get into a little argument. Somebody was cheating and get vexed and all this. Before we'd leave, we're all good friends, and we'd be back for the next night again for another game. And Mr. and Mrs. Farwell was wonderful to us. They'd play flinch with us, too. Mr. Farwell was very interested in the game of flinch, and so was Mrs. Farwell. But I remember one night she took the cards and threw them in the front of the stove, and I got down and picked them out of the fender of the stove, and next night again. She said myself and Mr. Farwell were cheating, but, you know, Probably we cheated a little, but we made it all up before we left. We were good friends. Again.
What do people do now for recreation? Port-au-Soir is expanding, becoming
Oh,
prosperous.
yes.
What do you do now for excitement?
Well, they got a show, they got theaters, they got restaurants, you know, and they have bingo games in the schools, because we have lovely schools here, lovely, and we have good teachers. And anybody who don't want an education, it's their own fault. I mean, they haven't got to blame the teachers, because we got wonderful teachers, and they got wonderful schools. Imagine when I went to school, take a junk of wood under my arm, and my children too, and go out and wait for hours for that place to heat up with no oil drum in it. Cold, and the ink would freeze even in the pens. But not so today. Walk in with their slippers on, sit down at their desks. And some people will grumble about that now because they got to pay probably a few dollars a year for the school. But look what we got. An education for everybody if they want to accept it. I'd like to be back, to go to school now, in those lovely schools. They're well kept, they're clean, they're spotless. Janitors and everything to look after it. But in our day, it was take an old broom and a few tea leaves and sprinkle your floor and then sweep it all up. Hey, for the next day. Dust enough to kill you. Open the windows, let the dust out while you were sweeping.
Do you think more could be done for Port-au-Soir to help Port-au-Soir help themselves?
Oh, yes. A lot of things could be done for Port-au-Soir.
Such as?
Such as, well, if we had a breakwater, if we had paved roads down the coast, and if they had some sort of a playground for children, and we could have probably the running water, which now we have to put in liquid pumps. We have the liquid lights, which is a wonderful thing. After a lot of rowing and tearing around, calling somebody down and giving abuse and everything, we got the lights. I think Port-au-Soir is going to be one of the loveliest places in St. Barb's district. Couldn't be nicer. In fact, anywhere in Newfoundland, I think, because people are moving in, and, you know, they're doing everything to make it look nice, and they're doing everything to have people interested in working, and they get something for their work. Not like they did one time, you know, when you had to provide in the fall for the spring, and if you didn't have enough flour or enough beef or pork, well, you had to do without it, didn't you? You have to do without that. But now you can go, we got a groceteria here now, go up and go around, pick up what you want. If something don't suit you, you haven't got to take it. You pick up a cabbage and it's rotten, you haven't got to take that cabbage, you can pick up another one. Nobody to say anything, just bring it down and get a check and walk out and come home. And if you got too much, they'll deliver it. We never had that before. Of course, they had nice stores here. True, and they were nice people that had those stores. But it seems like things are changing.